Hey guys, I hope you're having a good day today. Welcome to another session by Product School. I am Sinduja Ramanujam and I'm here to talk to you about how to be a growth PM. I have been in this area for almost 5 years now professionally, and I've been at Microsoft the same amount, and I'm super happy with what I do. It gives me a lot of joy. I was a developer before I became a PM, so kind of understand the problems that a developer faces, etc. And that puts me in a unique position as well. Personally, I am a mom of two kids, a two-legged one and a four-legged one. My two-legged one is a year old, and my four-legged one is 3 years old, and both of them keep me on my toes and busy, and I'm thankful for that. Today's topic, as we already saw, is how to be a growth PM. And today's agenda really is about defining the role of a growth PM. What does a growth PM really do? Why are we unique? What are different in our role when compared to that of a traditional PM, etc. And we're also going to be talking about how do you define a growth plan? How do you get from point A to point B? We're also going to be talking about building a user funnel. So most of you probably already have a user who's going through your product from end to end. So maybe you're already good with what is already out there. So we are going to be talking about how do you build the user funnel and taking the user from point A to point B. Last but not the least, and I think this is really, really important, is how do you execute your plan? You have everything on paper. You know you want to grow your business, you have a growth strategy. You also probably have a user funnel that you've built. You know where your leaky funnel is, you know you want to run experiments. But unless and until you execute, you build that muscle of really executing your plans to production, pushing it out to real users. The growth strategy is only good in paper. That's all you're going to see. So that I think is really important for everybody to think about and concentrate on. So who really is a growth PM? There are many PM functions out there, but a growth PM is very unique because you're thinking about multiple things at the same time. You're really thinking about your user, you're really thinking about your backend, you're thinking about your front end, and you want to grow your business. In a traditional feature PM role, maybe you're thinking about your feature. You want to take the users, you want to push the users through success of using your feature. How do people really adopt your feature? How do you get more, etc.? Or you're probably in a place where you're thinking about your reliability numbers, your accessibility, your efficiency. Maybe you want to take it from 99 to 999, etc. Right? But a growth really is in the cusp of marketing, product, and also a lot of user research, experimentation, etc. So if you really think about it, a growth PM is thinking about, hey, is this product right for this market? What's the right SKU for this particular market? How do I showcase my features, or what's the right price for this market so I can be successful in this arena? Can I use my credit cards that I've already enabled in my platform in this market? So if you are in other markets where credit card is not really valid, then maybe you need to think about other payment information or other payment instruments and constantly keep thinking about how do you improve your user experiences, get more users through your funnel. So that's your marketing hat probably. But on a different level, you're also thinking about your product development life cycles. You have a bunch of SKUs that you want to build. You want to build it in a certain markets, but can your backend support these markets? Can it be expanded? Can you rely on your backend to the load that you're going to bring in if you grow more people? You probably want to show the right SKU based on AI models. Do you have AI models built in your backend, etc.? So, and actually, if you do not, then you're probably in a lot of luck because you are going to learn the end to end of taking the feature from ground zero to really showing it to the users. You probably don't have a platform that supports what you want to build. You build a platform, you build a backend, shooting on your front end, your experimentation and your hypothesis to prove that what you thought about is really valid. Oh, one other point to really think about is you have a bunch of hypotheses, yes. You probably don't have a platform to build what you want to showcase the users. if there is going to be a lot of investment in the back end, and God forbid your hypothesis fails, you want to make sure that you can use your back end for something else. You do not want it to be throwaway work. That's probably where I firstly mentioned, I am in a unique position because I was a dev before I became a PM. So it really helps you understand a developer mindset. Even if you have not been a dev, sit with them, talk to them about what the architectural limitations are, etc. So you kind of know and you internalize what they go through when you're really building something that's throwaway. So that gives you a lot of empathy from your development standpoint and also your user standpoint. Thinking about your growth or of your organization should really be end to end, right? So it's not just about one piece of the puzzle saying, oh, I've acquired more users, I'm done. Not really. So you really need to think about, hey, I've really acquired these users. So have I onboarded them onto successful features, or have I set them up for success that they will be using my products the way that I intend them to use it? Have I engaged with them enough through their life cycle, them the value and the features that they really have not used, even though they're paying for the complete suite, etc. Towards the end of the journey, when it's time to renew, when it's time to retain, have I done everything possible in my power so they still stick with me in my retention journey? And if you have multiple SKU offerings, they probably started on a lower SKU. Have you spoken to them about upsell? Do you know that because you've spoken to them about all of this, paying SKU to a higher paying SKU? I do say lower paying SKU to a higher paying SKU, but it's really about right sizing for the user, right? Because you do want more users through your life cycle. You want them to be happy with what they have. You don't want complaining customers. So I say upsell, but it's really not from a marketing or a business standpoint. It's upsell for the user. If they have paid $100 a year, but they're not really using all the value, then maybe you should talk to them about the $50 SKU. That's really upselling the user to something that they will be using. And that's really important as a PM and for you to keep thinking about it constantly. The role of a growth PM is, I have broken it down into 4 pieces. You define a growth plan, you have a strategy, you know how you want to grow, puzzle that you want to plug in, etc. You then start building a user funnel, or in parallel start building a user funnel. You probably have users going through your experiences already, right? So you take their data, you kind of start mapping out saying, I had 20 people in acquisition, 10, 5, 3, whatever. So that really looks like your funnel. Traditional funnels do look like this, like a funnel, but you will also see as we keep going forward, you will see bar charts, etc. Again, the important piece of the puzzle is execute. So you need to execute. You should have a lot of executions in your feather before you can really start thinking big of G's, etc. And last but not the least, you need to keep repeating the magic. What got you here is not going to get you there. So you probably need to have multiple features that you've thought through already for you to execute on your growth plan, and you keep repeating the magic over and over again. So without further ado, let's go to the first one, which is you defining the growth plan for your organization. Really, the growth plan for your organization, think about it. So you probably have direct and indirect competition. You are in, I'm just going to give you an example here. Let's say you are in the McDonald's business, you are in an American fast food business. Your direct competition is probably at this point Burger King, because they are also the American fast food business. But take a step back. What is the motto of your business when you started? You're going to feed hungry people. You want to satisfy their hunger, which means all of the companies that in the same product offers the same value as you do are your competitors. Taco Bell is, Starbucks is, Dairy Queen probably is. So you need to really think about it as direct and indirect competition, and be able to map your growth plan, take a chapter or two from their growth strategy and see if that applies vision, mission statement, and retrofit it to your needs, right? So you really do not have to reinvent the wheel all over again constantly, but you do have to throw an invention in there. But the best of the best really do build on other people's ideas as well. So you don't want to reinvent when you can reuse. So that's also another very important strategy when you are in a PM role. The first piece of trying to build a growth plan is really doing a SWOT analysis. It's really simple, right? What is SWOT? SWOT is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. Simple, right? Actually, it is really simple. So, SWOT on a very high level is trying to analyze your direct and indirect competition, and also trying to make sure that you're internally and externally secure, knowledgeable, you know your weak points, you know where you want to improve on, and you have a plan. It's broken down into four categories on a super high level. You have internal and external, you have helpful and harmful categories. As I already said, strengths, weaknesses is really looking internally within your organization, making sure you know what your strengths are, you know what your weaknesses are. If you really find a weakness, put it in there. Because that is probably, if you start denying your weaknesses, that's probably going to be the downfall. Externally, when you start looking at external competitors, direct, indirect, as I already spoke to you guys about, you want to look at what your opportunities are when compared to the different markets or the different competitors that you are analyzing. And you also want to think about what your threats are from these different markets that you're analyzing. So, externally, for your opportunities, maybe these markets have not ventured into a certain area. Maybe they have not ventured into something that makes sense to you, right? So those markets are probably going to be the ones that you want to think about and say, maybe I want to be the trailblazer in these markets. So that should be what your opportunity, that's where your opportunity lies. Your threats, on the other hand, are probably going to be, I'm already doing this, so is my competitor. Maybe that's a threat level. So you need to turn that into your opportunity and see how you can grow from that threat level. Throwing out super high level ideas out here at this point is, say, for example, I have all of these super high level strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats I've identified. Now I know what my growth strategy needs to be. You can either concentrate on your weaknesses or your threats or your opportunities, or strengthen your strengths even more than what they already are, right? So just reading out what I call the SWOT analysis. So my strengths could be, I have a great UI and I offer better value when compared to everybody else that's out there. But my weaknesses are, in my UI, I have so many steps that there are a lot of people who fall through the cracks. And it's such a UI friendly element that is very easy to replicate, that people can go through what I've already shown them in a competitive view as well. My opportunities really at this point is to cut down my number of steps and create or move the number of people who are going through my funnel to higher numbers. I have a great backend. I can patent my backend and call it my IPO advantage over my competitors. But maybe my threat is, I already have a competition out there who does the same UI elements as I do. Maybe their backend is similar. So I need to really start moving on my IPO or my patent applications really fast. So that's what your SWOT analysis is all about. The second piece of the puzzle is, you're going to build your user funnel, right? As I already said, user funnels typically, well, funnel looks like a funnel, but user funnel also has multiple different graph elements that it takes as it keeps going. So your first piece of the puzzle is, you build a user funnel for your user journey. You start analyzing, or you start identifying your key areas where you completion rate. You probably have a leaky funnel, you do not want to have a leaky funnel, you want to plug those areas. So those are your areas of improvement. You start identifying features and the experiments that you can run in these areas. So now that you have a funnel, you know where your leaky funnels are, you know where you want to plug your funnels, etc. And you also have a very good understanding of, how do I make this a better funnel, right? So you start thinking about experiments, you start thinking about features, and that's where your hypothesis generation, everything comes into play, which I will talk about as we keep moving forward. So this is really your funnel. This is your user funnel, as you can see. But building a user funnel is more about also analyzing your drop-offs. That really is a user funnel. Here, I've started my user funnel journey from acquisition, but there have been instances where I've also started it from the people who've landed on my screen for the first time. So that's my total addressable market. Of them, how many have I acquired? Of the people who I've acquired, how many have I onboarded? of the people who I've onboarded, how many are really engaged with my feature. Towards the end, how many did I retain? And if I have a different SKU that I can sell them to, how many have I upsold? So as you can see, we have drop-offs marked here. So from acquisition to onboarding, I lost 20% of my customers. From onboarding to engagement, I lost 38%. Engagement to retention, 10%. I'm doing good. I'm showing the people that what my features are. My engagement journey is pretty good when compared to the rest of the journey, right? I am really struggling to upsell my people to either better SKUs that they can use or that's good for the business, however you define your success. So now that I have the features or the places that I have identified where my drop-offs happen, where the leaky funnel is, I start trying to identify where do I want to start investing in first. So as you can see, there are 4 different drops. So probably you guessed right that there are 4 different places where we can invest in. I have taken a logical approach here, saying the most leakage gets my first priority, second leakage gets the second, third leakage gets the third, fourth leakage gets the fourth, accordingly. But on a real world scenario, this is probably not the case. What really happens could be there are multiple factors that go into considering where you invest in first. So maybe it's not the upsell at all that you invest in first. Maybe you invest in retention first because you have your resources ready, you have the platform ready, and you can get going. So do not perfection. It's always progress over perfection. So if you can engage in this area, if you can make a dent in this area, go for it. Just because you have 56% drop off, if you do not have the infrastructure ready, get started, but keep executing on something that you already can, right? So now that we have this view of saying 1, 2, 3, 4, I am going to start creating my features. I'm going to start adding names to it. I'm going to start adding projected impact to it. So here you can see 3 columns. I have broken it down into where in the user funnel they are, what experiments do I think make sense, and the projected impact. So because I said 56% is my upsell drop off, and that's going to be my logical step that I'm going to take. So that's going to be my first plan of attack. My user funnel is my upsell. The experiment that I want to run is I probably want my users who have already acquired and who are in a good place in my engagement journey before the retention cycle kicks in. I want them to try new features that's different from their SKU when compared to the higher SKU or a lower SKU. Again, how are you define success? And my projected impact is $40,000. But okay, so let's take a step back here. I did say projected impact is in dollar amount here. It could be very different for your business. It could be very different for your organization. Maybe the impact that you are measuring is the number of people who are using your feature for free, or the number of people who you've taken from one step of the funnel to another. Or it could also be as very as the number of people who, or the number of days that they have used a particular feature, right? So projected impact is different depending on how you measure it. Here I've put in an example of dollar amounts, but it could be very different for your organization. So going back to the table, we have upsell. I'm probably going to have users try new features, and I'm projecting a 40K impact of this. The second also I have identified as upsell. Looks like we have a lot of problems in the upsell area at this point. I'm going to have discounts for higher SKUs. So if you've been in my ecosystem for a long time, then I probably want to discount you for a higher SKU, saying, thank you for being a valued customer. Do you want to try something else? And that's going to be my 5K in impact. Same thing, similar concept towards the rest of the user funnel, engagement, another experiment for engagement and for onboarding. I have identified different experiments that I can run within these areas and my projected impact for the same. Moving on to the next section of our journey, where I'm going to be talking to you about how do you experiment with the features that you've come up with, and how does the execution pipeline for the same look like. So you have your features identified. Now you need to start identifying experimentation for those features. You probably have one feature mapped to one experiment. There are instances where you can map one feature to multiple experiments. So the first feature that we spoke about from an upsell journey, saying, hey, I want you to try new features from my new SKU. Right? One experiment could be, I start showing you about the new features at the time you're going to renew. That's one experiment for me. My hypothesis there is, if I show you at the time of renewal, maybe you will change your mind and choose a SKU that's different from what you're going to renew into. But on a different second experiment could be, no, I think the hypothesis probably is if I start showing you the new features while you're in your engagement journey, saying, hey, do you want to try something else before you hit your retention? Maybe that's where my real value lies. So that's a second part of the same feature, but a different experiment. Within experimentation, we have multiple frameworks. I'm going to talk to you about two of them today, AA and AB. And what does AA and AB testing look like? Why do we do one versus the other? And also, when you start an experiment, you do want to think about the metrics that you want to measure. You do not want to get a negative result on the hypothesis that you're going to test by running that particular experiment and your objectives and key results that you have tied your success to. A little bit more about the objectives and key results or the performance indicators. They are on a very high level the objective of trying to do that particular experiment or trying to push the feature through, right? So if you think about it, my objectives and key results could be very simple. My key result that I want to drive for this particular quarter or fiscal year is I want to increase the number of people who I have acquired. Mission is increase the number of people users acquired. This then ties back to your user funnel of the first bar that you saw, which is your acquisition. So you want that bar to move for your OKR, for this OKR to really move from point A to point B. You also saw multiple other things here saying fiscal year, calendar year, quarter, however you measure impact, saying in the previous fiscal year, I made 2 million in my impact. If I did nothing with however it is today, I've just left it organically growing. I've not pushed any other external factors to what it already is bringing in, then my organic growth is going to look like $4 million. But if I invest in the experiments that I have been talking to you about, then my inorganic growth could be 5 million, the delta being 1 million. But my experiments could probably bring in 1 million. That's where the inorganic growth comes in. If you are in an organization like we are in Microsoft, you probably have commitments to say, my particular area is going to bring in 4 million or 5 million, whatever. We generally commit to the organic growth and saying organically we will be able to bring you 4 million inorganic yet, because again, it's a hypothesis. You do not know if your experiments are going to be successful or fail. But you do want to internally struggle for you to reach your stretch goal, which is your inorganic growth. That's probably where your success metric should be defined as well. Moving forward, we have other OKRs also that we've defined here. You probably have an onboarding increase, your onboarding bar. You want to increase the number of people who've onboarded through your engagement increase, you're decreasing churn, or you're increasing the number of people who you retain, and you want to upsell more people from one SKU to another, depending on how you define success. Now that you have your OKR set, the features that you want to invest, you also have a good understanding of what your inorganic growth is going to be, you start identifying experiments. So as you can see, the first thing that I have done here really is put in the OKR, saying my first experiment is going to be towards increasing the existing customer value, which really is my upsell area, right? I want you to try new features. That's going to be the first thing that I want you to do for you to increase the customer value. And my impact is 40K as I think about it. The Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4 is really you should start color coding them, saying, when can you get things done in a user life cycle, or in your calendar or your fiscal year's life cycle. So I've color coded them. You can look at the legend, what it looks like. Green is for coded, yellow is for I'm testing, blue is I am in production, and purple is I have my experimentation. So Q1, for this particular feature, I'm going to take the whole of Q1 for me to code, whole of Q2 for me to test and make sure that my code quality is up to perfection. I need my backend plumbed through. I need to test. I need to make sure that my experimentation pipeline is sound, etc. Q3, I'm in production. I have rolled out my experimentation. Users are seeing my experiment. I have split users into treatment where they see my experiment and control where it's already existing experience. And the next part of Q3, I will see my experimentation results. So that is how you build your execution plan as well. Doing something similar to the rest of the experiments that we have identified, saying, I'm going to increase the customer value again. This is also my upsell area. Offer discounts for higher SKUs. It's probably a longer experiment depending on many people or how much do you have to build to get this through, right? Engagement increase is probably a shorter experiment because I already have the infrastructure, not a lot of code, not a lot of testing, and I can finish my experimentation in production and also analyze my results within a quarter. So that's a shorter experiment. When something like this comes up, you want to see and make sure that you really do not have to wait for Q3 here for you to start executing on the engagement increase experiment. You can push it forward if you wanted to. Again, it's an engagement increase experience. It's very similar. So run them in parallel if you can, because you probably will cut down and wanting to think about, oh, this is not dependent on something else, or you do not want to be waiting for the platform to be ready, etc. Onboarding increase seems to be a shorter experiment when compared to that of the upsell. So maybe that's something that you pick up next. Again, on a very high level, what you're doing here is you're mapping your OKRs to the experiments that you're going to run, but also making sure that you have an execution plan and socializing this execution plan with your key stakeholders, right? Because if you are in a growth PM area, you probably have multiple key stakeholders at this point. You have partner PM teams, you have marketing, you have go-to-market teams, you have testing, you have engineering, etc. So once you know for sure that all of your key stakeholders, then is when you can start on any of these. You can either start the coding, testing, production, experiment, results, etc. So this phase is really important for your execution journey. Now, you've picked up one experiment saying, yep, I'm going to start now that I've socialized. I know everything that I've done for all my key stakeholders with my plan. They know that they can execute in the proposed timeline, etc. You start your experiment. So this slide is assuming that you have a back-end plumb through, you have your experimentation pipeline set, you know who your target audience is going to be, you know what your experiment is going to be, have coded your experiment, tested your features, and are ready to roll out. That is when you start AA. So an experiment really is broken down into two phases. You have a treatment and you have a control. Control is what you already see in production today. Treatment is the new experience that your hypothesis will be better than the control. You have, again, AA and AB. AA at this point, as you can see, it's all blank because the users are not seeing anything yet. There is no change for the user. This phase really is about plumbing back and making sure you're detected, you have statistically significant data, etc. What is statistically significant data? So let's say, in my user journey, user funnel, before my acquisition, when the users land on my page, I have people who land on my page every day. If I run my experiment, that's not really statistically significant data. It's not enough for me to determine if my experiment is success or a fail. So AA is a step where it says, how long do you need for you to reach a statistically significant number? As I already said, you start testing for randomization. If you are doing an A or an AB split, then you want to look for 50-50 split, saying 50% of my audience are seeing my control, 50% of my audience are seeing treatment. So that's the randomization, and you want to make sure that it's truly random. No UI is shown to the user, and this is used to really know how long does it take for you to run an experiment to get a successful hypothesis. Now, moving on to AB, now the users are starting to see what you really envision them to see. So the AB really runs until you reach statistically significant data. UI is shown to the user, and the data that you've measured throughout the process is then used to measure the real impact of your experiment. Not every experiment or not every feature needs AA. It depends on how much of a statistically significant number you have, how new is your system, you truly know that the randomization works, etc. If you're set, then you can jump to AB and start your experiment right away. Now you have data. You're a ninja PM. You've gone through this. You've blazed through it. You've run your experiment. It's out there in production, and you've gotten data back. As I firstly mentioned, you do want to have a bunch of metrics that you want to measure as part of your experimentation and analysis. Since we are analyzing increasing existing customer value, and the experiment that we ran is to try new features, we do have a bunch of metrics that we want to measure and compare against treatment and control. Right? So existing users in SKU1, we see 1,000 people in treatment, 1,000 people in control. Great. Looks like it's a 50-50 split. We are statistically significant and we are good to go. So we do want to measure this metric as well. How many people really bought SKU2 from SKU1? Right? So that's the next metric that you want to measure to see if you've been successful with this experiment. Did they really buy the SKU that you want? The third piece of the puzzle is, because of me showing this experiment, was there any churn? Did I confuse the user to no extent, and did they end up canceling the subscription rather than selling or buying a better SKU or sticking with what they already had? Did I lose them from my ecosystem? So that's a metric that you want to measure here as well. So these really are, you want to keep the metrics as less as possible and as impactful as possible, but you do want to make sure that you measure them, because doing good in one end, you do not want to mess up another part of the funnel. You do not want to mess up the people who are in your ecosystem or your onboarding, etc., because of a certain feature. So unless and until you are happy with the metrics that you measured, green, red, depending on where your numbers are, you will not be able to determine if your experiment was a success or a failure. By improving one piece of your funnel, you do not want to cannibalize another. And that's it. Once you've gone through all of this, you have your experiment successful. All you need to do is repeat this magic throughout your whole process. Easy as that. I hope you enjoyed the talk today. Thank you so much. This is Sinduja Ramanujam again. And if you have any questions or if you'd like to leave any feedback, feel free to reach me on LinkedIn. Thank you so much for listening to me today.